and welcome to the September 28th, 2021 regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name and address for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt this meeting, please either switch it to silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I'd like to ask the Planning Commission Secretary to conduct our roll call.
Mr. Faison.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
Here.
Ms. Parakis.
Here.
Mr. Rahman.
Here.
Mr. Roush.
Here.
Mr. Tagle.
Here. We have a quorum. Tonight, next item is approval of tonight's agenda. Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll move.
Mr. Faison, and second from Mr. Lambert. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item is approval of the minutes from the September 14th, 2021 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Hello. Mr. Tagle. And second by Mr. Rahman. Vote roll call, please.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Abstain.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item is public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Anyone in the audience like to make a comment of something that's not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. It's a public hearing, special use and preliminary site plan review for SU JPL N 2021-001, proposed Panera Bread Cafe with drive-through, east side of Coolidge, south of Maple, 1484 Coolidge, section 32, currently zoned MR Maple Road District.
Yes, thank you, and good evening to the Planning Commission. As the chairman alluded, tonight is a proposed conversion of an existing financial institution at 1484 Coolidge into Panera Bread with a drive-through. The site is located in the MR Maple Road District, and drive-through uses are a special use in that district. For a little reference about the site and some of the surrounding uses, the site is highlighted in red on your screen. To the north is a Rite Aid with a drive-through. To the south is a utility yard and clips a medical office building. To the east is Zone IB, which is Integrated Business and District, and it's a commercial use as an auto repair facility. And to the west, as across Coolidge, is also Integrated Industrial Business. It's a residential / commercial development. So for the most part, the applicant is keeping, they're keeping the footprint exactly the same existing building, but for the most part, they're keeping the site layout consistent with what's currently there today. We will note that the improvements to the site, including they're going to remove there's an existing canopy on the rear of the building that serves the drive-through use of the bank. They're removing that canopy. They're amending the second drive-through lane to add additional stacking spaces to get them to the required stacking amount for the drive-through use. They're adding new site landscaping to the site. They're adding outdoor seating area to serve the food use. They're adding an additional internal sidewalks and striping. They're reconfiguring the rear end of the site to have angled parking to serve the rear. They're doing facade improvements to the building, and they're proposing a new dumpster enclosure. We do note this is a non-conforming building. Section 1404 of the zoning ordinance deals with non-conformities. What it states is a non-conforming structure may be continuous as long as it remains otherwise lawful. subject to the following provisions, and the one that applies for this one in particular is a non-conforming building or structure shall not be enlarged, altered in a way which increases its nonconformity. We find that, one, the applicant is not amending the footprint of the existing building. In fact, they are eliminating the canopy on the rear of the building. They're not increasing the amount of parking that's in front of the building. They are required to screen that parking to bring into compliance. In addition, they will bring the lighting and landscaping into compliance, and they are complying with the other Maple Road design requirements. So for that reason, we find this as a permitted reoccupancy of an existing non-conforming structure, provided that they are granted the special use by the Planning Commission for the drive-through. The site plan itself, the building itself is outlined in red. The drive-throughs are those red lines with the arrows. The drive-through goes behind into the side of the building. As we know, the building and the parking are non-conforming structures, but we do find that it can be reused for this purpose if it's granted special use. We do know that there is existing parking that does front on Coolidge. That is non-conforming, but we are requiring it to be screened as part of the requirement of the Maple Road District. There are multiple points of access to the site. There are 2 off of Coolidge that will remain, plus there are 3 locations of proposed cross-access, 2 to the east and 1 to the north. The fire department has reviewed the access and circulation and notes that it is sufficient. The engineering has also reviewed the application, and they do note some following concerns. Nothing that they deem major, but something that should be cleaned up as this project moves forward. First, they do note there is a pedestrian crossing that comes off the parking in Coolidge and crosses the parking lot in front of the building. They do note that it's askew or unaligned, and so they're asking to actually it lines up straight and perpendicular. They're asking to change the layout of the rear parking to one-way. If you notice, it's angled parking, but the applicant has deemed it as two-way. They're asking it just to be one-way traffic only. Reconfigure, there's a cross-access to the right aid and to the northeast corner of the site. They're asking that be reconfigured. It's just a little bit askew, and it's not actually in the actual easement location. So they're asking that be lined up. The applicant's proposing wheel stops rather than curb along the south and west side of the building. So we're asking to actually curb that. And then lastly, on the south side of the building, we're asking they widen the sidewalk to 7 feet, because right now it's 5 feet. And if they do that, they can reduce the parking to 17 feet rather than the 19 as shown. The applicant has provided the required number of automobile and bicycle parking. We do note, as noted, that they do need to screen the front parking that fronts on Coolidge. There's also parking proposed on the side and rear, which is compliant. We do note that they are seeking a loading waiver space. This has been granted for many similar uses by the city, but it does require an action of the Planning Commission to eliminate the loading space requirement. They have provided a lighting and landscape plan. The landscape is compliant. The only thing we note is they indicate there's a trash enclosure, but they haven't indicated what the screening of that enclosure is, so that should be noted in the plans. And lastly, they did submit a photometric plan. We found it very difficult to read because it had a lot of lines on it, and it wasn't very easy to decipher. So we asked them to resubmit that. We did note that it appears that lighting levels do exceed the maximum along the south and northern property lines. And lastly, the applicant did not provide lighting fixture cut sheets, so we do ask that they submit a full, complete photometric plan. Applicant has provided elevations and rendering. The proposed material includes painted brick, which is existing, glass, CMU, and a fiberglass panel. That's what that green color is, a fiberglass panel. The applicant, when we wrote our report, had not confirmed the transparency requirements. They have done so, and they are meeting the required transparency along Maple Road. The elevation on the top is the elevation that would actually front on Coolidge, and so those transparencies has been met. The elevation below is the drive-through. That would be actually the north elevation, and that's the drive-through window. This is a rendering looking at the building from the parking lot in Coolidge. The outdoor scene is shown just to the right of the screen, and again, all those windows are along the front that fronts on Coolidge. This is a rendering looking from the other view of Coolidge. Again, looks in at the drive-through window and the proposed front elevation. So we do support the special use and do find that the repurposing of the building is the best management practice that promotes sustainability. The applicant is making the building and site more conforming with the facade improvements, photometrics, lighting, and outdoor seating. Maple Road zoning does provide for a variety of uses, including this use as a special use. The proposed purposing would not require or should not require any additional public services that are required for any other use. And lastly, the repurposing of the building would reduce the environmental impact more than tearing the building down and building a new one. So we do support the reinvestment of the site, and we are recommending approval with those conditions noted: screening parking from Coolidge, loading space or seek a waiver from the Planning Commission, resubmit a photometric plan, lighting fixture details, and address the engineering department's concern. There should also be the screening of the dumpster enclosure should be on that recommendation list as well. So that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for our, go ahead.
Yeah.
Barakis.
Thanks, Mr. Carlisle. Could you put up the page on access and circulation for a second? I did have a couple questions. That one, I think you mentioned the one that sort of goes askew. I'm talking about the blue arrow. Where does that actually go? Because I believe the Rite Aid is to the north. That seems to be going to
This is the Rite Aid. This goes to another property that's just adjacent to the Rite Aid. It's actually, so the engineering department looked at it, and it's actually not, the cross-access is not directly located within the easement, and so we're actually asking that be kind of realigned. In discussion with the engineering department, it wasn't essential that remain, so that may actually go away as part of this review. But as of now, it's not located within the easement itself.
Okay. And then the other question I have is the flow. So we talked about making one way where where the parking is at an angle, and so presumably it would go from south to north.
Yeah, so the angle parking is in this location.
Yep.
Because it's not wide enough to accommodate the required two-way access, what we're asking is I would defer to the traffic engineer, but most likely what would happen is it would be one way this way, and so these would have to, well, actually it shows it that way, so this would remain as one way this way. Because right now they're shown as two-way traffic, and so we're asking they just make that one way only.
Right. So my concern is the entrances in and out of the Panera from Coolidge are showing going both ways at the south and the north entrance, and it seems that if someone's entering on the north side, it seems like the flow is going in a counterclockwise motion, so I don't know that we would want them to have entrances on both sides there.
So what will likely happen is this will be one way out and this will be one way in because this is the outlet also to the drive-through as well. And so the traffic circulation would be this way, and then lastly this way, and then come down one way this way. So that's, I think, what would be the most sense for a traffic flow standpoint.
Okay.
And those comments were not noted by the traffic engineer in their review. So it's something that we can go back and confirm about exit only, entrance only at this location.
Okay, and sorry, but I'm still on this traffic thing because I didn't notice a traffic review in the agenda packet, and that was another issue I have, or question I guess I have, is that there hasn't been any pictures really provided to show what's going on Coolidge at that location. And what's going on is it's a turnaround with a light. And I'm trying to imagine how the flow of traffic will be affected by a Panera, which has different hours of business and peak hours of business than a bank. And that intersection at Maple and Coolidge can sometimes be pretty busy, and most of the people using that turnaround, I think, are not trying to get into the bank, but they're trying to do a turnaround, and now all of a sudden we're rerouting. That might be a larger destination. So I would want to make sure that the traffic consultant has considered all those things and that we are sure both about the one-way entrance and exit and making sure that it's safe, because I can see people coming off that turnaround and going straight in, and people coming out where some people are trying to do the turnaround. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
So we did send this to the engineering department for the review. They did not send this to the traffic engineering consultant for their review. I can't tell you why. My assumption would be they thought that changing from a drive-through bank to a drive-through Panera didn't require additional consultant review. If this is a concern, we can certainly send this back to them and get their additional opinion on it. But in their initial review, they didn't think this warranted any additional traffic review.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Sticking on the same topic for the moment. I did notice when I was at the site that the Coolidge entrance and exit on the north side appears to be configured in a fashion. It's labeled one way out now, and I think it's got a curb cut for that fashion. So my first question is, this is a pre-existing non-conforming use. What is, or what are the limitations? Because I noticed in the review, it says that not only can the building not be enlarged, but the use can't be changed in some fashion?
It's not a non-conforming use, it's a non-conforming structure.
So it's just the structure?
Just the structure. The use is permitted by special use in this district.
Okay. So, and then the non-conforming structure, is it just the building or is it the parking as well?
Both.
Both, okay.
So that's why we are requiring, we typically, with these types of issues, we don't require them to take out parking that's already existing. They couldn't put more parking in front that's not there, and so to accommodate that, we're requiring them to screen that parking, which is not screened at this particular time.
Okay, so my next question as a result of that is kind of a theoretical one. And that is, since the parking in the front is supposed to be screened to be within conformity, and yet the building has a transparency issue that Mr. Savina gave us a nice education on a couple meetings back about how valuable that is. And is it somewhat counterintuitive to put screening up in front, or is it such that the screening is just for the lower portion of the vehicle and you're not worried about blocking?
The screen is 30 to 36 inches in height, and so the required transparency is up to 8 feet in height. So there's a significant amount of area above the screen wall that would be transparent.
Right.
So the car driving down Coolidge or the person walking down Coolidge would not see the headlights of the cars parked in the parking lot, but they would see activity within the building if they looked past those cars.
Great, thank you. My next question was regarding the engineering review. I'm not sure I understood what the concern was. Well, first of all, with the easement issue and reconfiguring that, if they just change the easement to coincide with the actual use, that would eliminate one portion of the problem that's pointed out, I believe. The second things that get raised are this left turn from Rite Aid. I'm not sure I understand exactly what they're contemplating. Are they contemplating a car coming from Rite Aid and then turning left once it gets on the property, or making a left turn from Rite Aid? Because Rite Aid has got, I believe, one-way traffic going to the drive-through at that point.
I think they're concerned about, so the Rite Aid cross-access is this one right here. I think they're worried about, especially if this is one-way traffic coming this way, about someone coming left-hand turn conflicting with cars coming out this way. So the access coming from Rite Aid would have to be right only to come to go with the natural flow of traffic moving towards Coolidge. That's the concern, I believe.
So you think they're trying to make it a one-directional turn from Rite
From Rite Aid to this site, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Rahman.
1 second. I think I just want to make sure I got the last of these. Oh, the last one I had was the parking bumpers. That one I don't understand at all. I mean, it doesn't seem to make sense to me that you would take away parking bumpers, which are a safety issue, and replace it with the car being able to drive all the way up to the sidewalk, and with the sidewalks only being, 4 inches high or something like that, the likelihood of a car bumper going over the sidewalk.
So a standard is a curb. I believe it's a 6-inch curb. So we require the sidewalk to be replaced. If it's a 4-inch now, it'd be a 6-inch curb. That would actually be a curb stop rather than using bumpers. We don't allow new parking bumpers to be installed in the city.
Okay, so obviously it's replaced by the 6-inch bumper, which solves the safety question. But is there a reason that you don't want the parking bumpers, just for informational purposes?
It's an engineering standard. I've never been asked the question before.
Great. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, now Mr. Rahman.
Okay,
Do you know?
I see that we have loading space deficiency, right? So that's something that we can give the waiver. So my question is, there will be loading trucks because it's a Panera Bread. There will be a lot of supplies, So the question is, how many parking spots, or do you have any plan, like where that loading space could have been, and how many parking spots need to be eliminated to have a loading space? That's something that I would like to know maybe later when.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't show a loading space as part of their plan. We didn't consider it as part of review other than the fact they need a waiver. It's, as noted, for other food users, we've given a loading space waiver, but it's going to be up to the applicant to justify that they don't need one.
I wouldn't be too worried about it if it's some other application, but it's a bakery, right? So I expect that big truck would come and park somewhere. And I would like to know when the applicant turn comes, like how often these trucks come to that place and what is the size of the truck. That could be connected to the traffic, pattern also. So, thank you.
Any other comments for our planning director? Or, yes, go ahead,
Mr. Carla, and this may be just an oversight, but at the top of page 5 in your report, you say that they provided 2 bicycle parking spots, but in the, 2 spaces below that, it says 0 bicycle. Is that just a mistake there?
When I first reviewed it, I didn't catch that they put bicycle parking, so I had 0 on both spots. And then when I went back and reviewed it, I found the location of bicycle parking. I just didn't change it in the table, so they are sufficient.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the other question is the requirement for the screening on Coolidge. Obviously, for those of us who've driven by there's no screening right now. Is that because when the Maple Road zoning district was established, it was established after the bank was actually there?
Correct. So it's a new, the bank was developed under a previous ordinance. This is a new ordinance. The new ordinance would actually require the building to be at the street. And you can only have a row of parking if it's 2 stories. Since they are non-conforming structure and the parking's there, we are requiring the screen wall to be used as screening of parking. And that's a requirement of the Maple Road District. If you do have parking that fronts on the road, it has to be screened.
Thank you.
And the only comment I wanted to make is to address Ms. Parakis about the left-hand turnaround. You're concerned that people going straight to the entrance would be a problem. I didn't quite understand your thought on that. Did you have an issue with that, or they're okay with it?
I think more if it's showing right now as a 2-way, so people could be exiting at that point.
Okay, I see what you're
Where
saying.
people are going straight, but also turning around, and it could cause problems.
right
If there is a light, but you can turn left on red at a 1-way.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it is one-way entrance right now for it was for the bank.
Yeah, it might be, but this is not showing it like
okay.
that.
I get it now. Okay.
So I'm saying I would not approve it that way if it were 2-way in both locations.
Got it. Okay. Yes, Mr. Tagle.
Mr. Carlisle, or did excuse me, have you talked to the petitioner why they were indicating a 2-way drive but showing 1-way parking configurations in that back? I mean,
It's something we caught on the site plan.
it appears that they have enough room to put 90-degree parking and maintain that 2-way. And I would assume they want the 2-way so that people coming from the north side of the site, whether it's Rite Aid or whether it's from the northeast, that they could come around and get in the drive-up lane. But
I don't have an answer for you, Mr. Tagle. All we know is because it was shown as 1-way parking, we basically said just take off the 2-way directional.
right, okay,
So.
thanks.
Any other comments or questions for our staff? Okay, next would like to invite the applicant to come up and talk about your project. Sure. Answer a few questions.
Absolutely.
You already heard him.
Thanks for having me. My name is Todd Bundren. I'm an architect working with Panera Bread and representing them tonight, and we're glad to be here from St. Louis, Missouri. Start off, wanted to thank Brent and Mr. Carlisle and everything for working with us up to this point. They've been very professional and very helpful, and the services have been wonderful to get to this point. And I don't have too much to add. I think that was a great presentation. I think he covered most of the bases, and you got a chance to look at, the rendering of the beautiful new Panera that's going to be coming to your community. I know Panera wanted me to express the fact they're very excited for this property. They were excited for being able to relocate and adding more services for the customers so they could provide more ways of getting the food to the customers with the added drive-through, the rapid pickup, and then the addition of the large patio outside that people could enjoy. During the pandemic, the rapid pickup and the drive-through has become critical, I think, for a lot of fast casual folks, and so being able to integrate it, I think, into this larger facility is going to be great for everybody. So they're very excited about that. Also excited because the most sustainable building is the one you don't build. So we're very excited to be reusing an existing building in your community, not having to tear it down and build new is always exciting when that opportunity comes up and when it's available. Couple things I think that were brought up that we can go ahead and address was, first of all, the parking in the back. That was a great question. My civil engineer is here as well, and we were talking about that earlier, and that just was so tight up there when we did the analysis. We really weren't able to get that 24 feet that we want between parking, even when we turned it 90 degrees. So unfortunately, the distance that we had available to us only allowed 18 feet, which is really too tight in our mind for two-way traffic. So that's how that evolved to two-way traffic. And it was a clerical error, unfortunately, that ended up with showing the two arrows on the site plan. So the intention was for that to be a one-way.
Well, you are aware that when you have 90-degree parking, but you can allow your car to overhang a green space,
Right.
2 feet, so that now reduces the space, the 90-degree space, to 17 feet. So if my math is correct, 2 rows of 17 plus a 24-foot aisle would fit in that distance that you show the angled parking. And again, maybe I'm wrong, but wouldn't it be preferred to have some people be able to get into the queue from the north side of the property than not?
Into the drive-through?
Yeah.
Well, anytime we could get two-way parking, I mean, two-way drive aisle, it makes sense, I think, to us. But I think with the analysis, with the distances we saw at the time, we can go back and look at it. But I think Panera was comfortable, and I think we worked with staff and in engineering, and everybody ended up being comfortable with this layout. And it just seemed like it made sense at the time. It seemed like it was safe for the customers, and we were providing two-way drive in the front. So we felt we would just, instead of getting really close to maybe being off on site, that this was the safest way to move forward and go ahead and give a single drive. But I do appreciate
Your choice, but there is
Yeah.
room for a two-way drive.
I appreciate the comment, and I'll definitely take it back to them and talk about it. That was one of the questions. I think another one was the deliveries.
Yeah, the loading
Absolutely.
space, how many, parking spots have to
So-
be eliminated, and what kind of truck normally you guys use, and what is the frequency, and how big size truck normally, delivers, all these ingredients that you need. So
Those
it's
are
a long
great
question.
questions.
Yeah.
So operationally speaking, Panera does not typically have a dedicated delivery spot, right? They got 3,000 locations in North America. It's a very sophisticated operation they use of delivery. And they're going to have a large, it's like a WB62, they call it. It's the really big truck, right? That's going to bring dry goods 2 times a week, potentially 3, depending on what time of year it is. And that always delivers off hours. So probably on this site, they're gonna pull it in, they're gonna go back around our one-way drive in the back, come down on the side during off hours, unload. It takes between 20 and 30 minutes tops, and then they're gone. And they work very hard to make sure that that's not coming in during peak hours, or it's coming off hours, because they have an interest in keeping those big trucks off the site when they're trying to get a lot of people to buy bagels on their site, right? So that's gonna happen 2 to 3 times. And then a smaller box truck, I'm sure you've seen, 15 feet long, a smaller one. That's going to come every night and deliver dough. So that'll show up after hours once again every night, and that's how they run their operations. And those are the 2 main deliveries that occur throughout the week. And our hope is that this variance could be achieved, and that we could work with you on that, because you brought up a great issue. The parking is very tight on this site as it is existing. I think we're right up against. I think we were supposed to have 43 and we have 44. So to remove parking on this site, I think it would take us out of compliance with the ordinances, and it's something that Panera would prefer not to do if they didn't have to, because their operations don't need it. So it's kind of an unneeded thing in their mind. But with much like everything else that you guys have brought up, I appreciate all the comments. We're going to work with you guys on everything on this list. We've already gone through it and talked to Panera. We're going to do all the berming in the front to give that. Everything I think we've seen in here, we're going to agree to and go ahead and make those modifications. But we were really hoping that we could work with you guys on getting a variance on that drop-off, if that's possible.
Just to double check.
Absolutely.
You said that majority of your Panera Bread places, they don't have the loading space? Is that what I heard? Okay.
That is very true. It's a little unique. Some fast food people do it. I think McDonald's has one, but Panera just, if you go and look at a Panera that has, they typically do not have a dedicated loading zone for all kinds of reasons. One of which is that they typically just don't even need it because the drivers come in, they're in and out so fast. It's a pretty quick operation that they have in place. So they were asking if you would please not make them do that, if possible.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
I had a question about the front entrance, which I believe is on a corner. And I think that the south door heads right onto a patio, is that correct? And it's sort of like a vestibule.
Absolutely.
Would you consider moving your handicap parking to the west side of the building so it's closer to the entrance rather than having people who are having difficulty, presumably, having to walk around the patio, which makes it farther?
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Following up on the loading question, where do they load into the building?
So, great question. I mean, their dry goods are going to be everything from...
No, I'm saying, not what, where?
What's
What's the loading door? What's the door to utilize to load? Is it the
you-
one at the southeast corner?
I don't know if you guys have a plan available, the floor plan to pull up.
We do.
Let's see.
There's a floor plan
So-
on page 26 of the agenda.
There it is. Okay, I'm sorry. So typically on this particular project, on this one, it's going to be the south. So there's one entry right there in the back of house on the south.
East corner.
Yeah. So the hope would be that they would pull in there, be able to drop off, but they could also drop off in the front and go through because they're doing it after hours. They could drop off on the, what would that be, the northwest corner if they needed to, but the primary back of house entry would be that one that's back just to the, would that be the east of the patio there.
Given the additional land that you have at the southeast corner of the property itself that's undeveloped, you certainly have the parking if you needed to put the parking in. That would warrant a loading position if you're coming there during the day. So I assume that you guys are really confident that you're not going to be there at a time that's going to disrupt traffic.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's within their interest to not do that for sure. Yeah.
That was it. That's all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else for the petitioner? Seeing none? I'll
Thank
bring.
you.
This is a public hearing, so I have to open it up for a public hearing. So I'm doing so, opening the public hearing at this point. Any public that would love to come up and comment on this project? Seeing no one in the audience, I'll close the public hearing. Next item is bring it back to the commission for comments and resolution. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Maracas.
Yeah, I wanted to ask another question to the, I don't know if it's planning consultant or Mr. Savadon, but how does that work with, I imagine the reason we're having an entrance from the Rite Aid is to make it easier to access the Panera off Maple Road. Instead of doing a double turnaround, people can heading west on Maple can turn into the Rite Aid to get to the Panera. So that seems, they might even put a Panera sign on Maple Road with an arrow, kind of like Costco does. And, Costco seems pretty far from 13, but they're bringing people in all the way from 13. Is that the same thing that's going to happen here? Is it permitted? Have we looked into the traffic ramifications of that?
Well, the quick answer is they're existing today. So they're going to continue to be utilized. The more long-winded answer is the Planning Commission has the authority to require cross-access. It's a best management practice for traffic management. And those cross-access easements would have been approved when these developments were reviewed and approved and constructed. They would have been installed when they were constructed. So it's basically, the 75% of accidents on major roads involve left-hand turns. So if you can reduce the number of left-hand turns on major roads, and if someone were to come to this area, for example, And when it's, if it's approved tonight and constructed as a Panera, they're here to grab lunch at the Panera, stop at the drugstore, then stop, at one of the other tenants in the other space to the northeast. That's zero. Once you arrive to the site, that's no trips off-site to stop at 3 different places. So for traffic management, there's a benefit for reducing those left-hand turns. So that's hopefully I'm answering your question.
Yeah, I mean, it's answering the question, although Coolidge only would allow right turns, so there wouldn't be any left turns. So I guess, I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks there's a difference between the traffic generated by a bank and a Panera. And I just don't feel comfortable having not even looked at these issues. I mean, honestly, I love what you're doing with it. I love repurposing buildings. It looks great. Obviously, I think a Panera is going to do much better than a bank, but I think it's a little bit premature in terms of not having looked at the traffic ramifications. I'm just not comfortable with it at this time.
So just to reiterate what Mr. Carlisle said, it did go before engineering, who, for whatever reason, I'm not a civil engineer, decided not to send it to the traffic consultant. It's certainly within the Planning Commission's purview to make as part of the resolution for a design consideration to ask the engineering department to have the consultant look at it.
Okay.
And if there's any substantive changes to the site plan as a result, it can come back.
Okay, and are they allowed to put a sign advertising Panera on Maple Road, like where the Rite Aid is, almost acting like, not acting, but almost as if it's included in that strip mall? I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I get that it's nice to have one stop, but I'm just curious about that.
I don't believe so. I think that would be an off-site sign and not permitted.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Roush.
I wanted to make a comment with reference to Ms. Parakis' question or comment, and that is the driveway at the northeast corner of the property is a drive that goes straight out to Maple Road, and there's a access on that roadway to get to Rite Aid, or the strip mall that's to the east at that point. So it's kind of like a direct access that could be utilized going in and out, that doesn't have to drive around the building or anything like that to get in and out. And a question for you then, Mr. Is an option also to have, as opposed to having the matter come back, to have the traffic engineer approve the review? In other words, have the engineering department review the traffic consultant's review.
Yeah, I think the concern, as I understand the concern, is want to make sure that we haven't, we're not missing something in terms of that. So absolutely, I mean, we all want the same thing. We want this to be safe.
Right.
So certainly, however the wording is, a design consideration for the engineering department to have the consultant review, traffic. I think that's a good comment and a good.
Okay. Could we, at least at a minimum, require that the south entrance be entrance only and the north entrance be exit only?
I would say, I would want to make sure that the engineering department agrees with that. So whatever the safest
Right, okay.
delineation is.
Okay.
I mean, they're the experts.
I'm assuming they're gonna.
Yeah.
They're gonna.
I mean, there may be a scientific reason not to do it that we're missing here.
Right.
But it just makes sense that you have one direction, unidirection flow of traffic, considering where the parking lot is sitting right now in that angled parking lot. You can only park one way. So it just makes sense to have the south entry and the north exit.
Right.
And again, with that turnaround, like I said, there's a light there, and I can't imagine people coming out there. I just think it's dangerous.
It can be as simple as, I mean, we have a number of consultants. We use a firm of OHM for traffic. It can be again, a design consideration to send this to our traffic consultant to review prior to final. So it can be as simple as that. Again, safety first.
Any other thoughts? Well, I had one as far as that entrance exit from the property from Coolidge. And I would like to hear from our developer or petitioner, the architect. If you can come up for a minute.
Absolutely.
Are you willing to make the south curb cut only entrance? Is that, because I think that's the issue here, the concern at least.
I don't have a, if that's what's going to be safe for the community and everyone here feels strongly about it, I'd obviously have to confer with Panera at the end of the day, but I don't think that they'd have a problem with that. I think, we're talking about, if I'm looking this way, the south being on the right side of the plan there, the south, so that would be in only, and we could come up and you could enter that two-way in the front. You could get up and get into the drive-through on that side, and then you could get to the angled parking and then work your way down, and then you would leave on the north side and come out and be able to make your exiting there. Is that?
Yeah, or you could even just enter and take a quick left, park in front, and leave at the north side. You don't have to do the whole loop, but just, if you're not familiar with it, right at that entrance, right at that level, there are people coming south on Coolidge trying to do a turnaround,
Right.
and there is a light there.
Right.
And most people don't wait for the light, they turn on red, and if you have people all of a sudden who are coming out, I don't know if the bank has been closed, I have no idea, but I don't ever remember seeing cars coming out there. So to add that feature, so they have been allowed?
Yeah, and so from my perspective,
Absolutely.
Making the left turn at that light to go to Rite Aid, you don't really recognize that that's a potentially conflicting traffic, so you're used to on the red making the left turn. And when you realize that you can't do that because there's cars coming the other way, or there's people that want to go into Panera, it gets all blocked up there, and you can't,
Right.
people aren't making a left-hand turn.
Well, to second what Brent said, we're absolutely going to try to make this as safe as possible. So if you feel the best thing for your community is to have a one-way in there and a one-way out, that's fine.
Good.
Obviously, what you said, I think, makes a lot of sense, too, to maybe have the professionals, the engineers look at it, see if there's anything we're not thinking about here tonight, and we would absolutely encourage that. But if they come back and say that that's the best thing, and you guys all agree with it, 100%, if that's the safest for your community, we'll 100% do that. Yeah.
Yes, Mr.
So if a condition of approval is to send this to this traffic consultant for review, I will assure you that it will be sent to the traffic consultant for a review prior to final.
Good. I think, and we'll talk through our resolution on that one. That sounds, thank you for that. Any other thoughts before we make a resolution? No other concerns? Anybody like to word a resolution? Wordsmith it? I was always looking to Mr. Lambert because he's good at that.
I'll take a stab at it, but I'll count on my colleagues for additional assistance.
Sure, absolutely, we'll help you.
Resolved that special use approval and preliminary site plan approval for the proposed Panera Bread Cafe with drive-through east side of Coolidge, south of Maple, which is at 1484 Coolidge, Section 32, currently zoned MR, Maple Road District B, granted subject to the following conditions. Screen parking from Coolidge Highway and also screen the trash enclosure. Provide transparency calculation, waive the loading space requirement, resubmit the photometric plan and lighting fixture details, address the engineering department noted items, move the handicap parking to the east side of the building. I think that's where we're looking. Require review of the plan to the traffic engineer, and recommend that the Coolidge entrances be modified to one-way.
Mr. Roush, you want to
Was the
add something to
handicap going to the east or the west side?
West.
The west side, isn't it?
West side.
Yeah, the west side.
Okay.
From the
west-
south to the west.
I'm sorry, correct it to the west side.
From the south to
Do you want to be more specific on the entrance and exit to the property?
That the south entrance be one-way entrance and the north entrance be one-way exiting.
Thank you. Any additions to that?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, just one question. Were we going to decide that, or were we going to have the traffic engineer opine and determine?
I think we're having the traffic engineer opine it.
You just, and Julie, feel free to jump in. I think the verbiage that Mr. Lambert used was quite good, in my opinion. He said recommend. He didn't say require. So engineering will be on notice that the Planning Commission recommends that. When the consultant looks at it, he'll consider that, he or she, and we'll come up with the best design with that in mind.
Thank you. Any other thoughts before we
I
second?
just wanted to make sure that Mr. Lambert's reference to the entrances and exits were to Coolidge. That you said
Coolidge, yes, yes.
Coolidge. Very good. Any other thoughts before we second? Okay, may I have a second on this? Go ahead. Mr. Faison, seconds. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lambert,
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly,
Yes.
Ms. Parekis,
Yes.
Mr. Rahman,
Yes.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
Mr. Tagle,
Yes.
Mr. Faison,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Krant.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing it to this commission. Next item is public comments for items on tonight's current agenda. Seeing no response from the audience on that, we'll move on to our next item is Planning Commission comment. I'll start this time with Mr. Tagle.
I'm all set, thank you.
Mr. Faison.
Nothing from me.
Mr. Lambert.
I was just going to mention, I'm sure Mr. Savadat will give us a report on last night's city council meeting. I would encourage you all, if you did watch the meeting last night, to rewatch it, especially where the Planning Commission recommendations came up. We've got some interesting comments from some of the public, so take a look and listen.
No comment.
No comment, thank you.
No comment, thank you.
Nothing for me.
None.
Mr. Savadan, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so last night, two items were on the agenda for City Council. The first was the Plan Unit Development Amendment on Big Beaver Road, north side of Big Beaver, just east of John R., where he was seeking to replace two 10,000 square foot one-story buildings with one 3-story apartment building with 2,000 square foot of retail on the first floor. That was approved as submitted, so even though we encouraged the applicant to think about a couple of other things, he decided not to seek that, although we can put some verbiage. No, we actually, never mind, strike that. So that was approved as he submitted. The second was the conditional rezoning for Pineview condominiums located west, direction sometimes, west of DeQuinter, north of Long Lake Road. The applicant submitted a request prior to the meeting to be removed from the agenda so that it can come back to Planning Commission. I believe he seeks an actual recommendation. If you recall, there was a motion to deny. That was a 4-4, which is not an approval. There was a recommendation to approve, which was 4-4, which is not a recommendation to approve. So it's kind of not a recommendation, but anyways, he wants to come back to Planning Commission. I owe Mr. Rauch an apology. The minutes that were prepared for the announcement of public hearing that went before City Council on the 13th included the draft minutes of the August 24th meeting. And we have a really good recording secretary, and typically there's not any modifications to the minutes. So I'm used to not swapping out the minutes. In this instance, on the 14th, there were changes that were made that should have been, that were in the final minutes, but I neglected to swap the minutes out. So Mr. Rauch's comments were not in the agenda that was online on the Thursday night or Friday. So Mr. Rauch, it was my error. It was not ill-intended, but I do owe you an apology because you made an effort to do that, and it should have been included, and it wasn't. So that's it.
Okay. So Mr. Tagle's vote is going to really be important next time Mr. Apatheria comes here. Okay. Any other thoughts? I have none, so this meeting's adjourned.